Oh no, don't. Yes, please. Thank you. Alright, stream should be up. Let me check. Oh, God. Mute. Okay. That one's working on Twitch. And then for YouTube. Oh, God. Yep, cool. Bit more delay, but we're there. Alrighty. We're up and running. My throat's a bit weird tonight, and I'm tired as fuck, so we'll see how long this lasts, but I want to get something productive done today. So I haven't done too much since the last time we spoke. I've been a bit busy. But what we did do was what I did, I should say, yes. Is I figured out that we could do this enum instead of. Why is it yellow? What is with this highlighting? Is writer okay? Is there a way to reload this? Hold on. Reload all from disk. What is happening here? Let me close the file. Reopen it. There it goes. Wow, look at that. Let's close this one. Reopen this one. Looks so much nicer. Let's close this one. Reopen this one. Okay. Close entity query. Don't care about you. Close turn system. Close input system. We're gonna grab you. Close that. Keep that. Keep. No, I don't need this anymore. Delete. And that's fine. Yep, okay, we'll close this. Alright. Sorry about that. So, since we last spoke, I figured out that you could do, I found it out in C#, they have a thing set up for enum flag logic. So previously I had like a byte for every single flag that I assigned, and then I would do like 1 bit shift to the left the flag number every time. But I can just now instead do like or equals a specific property, and now it does exactly the same thing, but it's just a little bit neater, a little bit tighter, and it makes sure that I don't manage to fuck it up somewhere. Because one of the bugs that I was having was I accidentally was or equaling the number 7 as opposed to 1 to the bit shift to the left 7, and so I was getting these weird weird flags that I wasn't supposed to get. So I figured that out, but then I found out that this was just a better way to do it, and also kind of safeties yourself against that issue moving forward. Let me pull up the chats. Got this one. And then actually I have to pull up the YouTube one again because it's a different link every time. Hold on. Live streaming. Pop out chat. Okay. So then we're gonna go down here, put that there. Grab you. Grab you, and we'll grab you. Okay. And now I can go into here and we can play some music in a second. But let's listen to. I want to listen to the Risk of Rain soundtrack again. Okay, let me make sure the audio levels are working on. Turn them up a little bit. I'll give it a second to pick up the audio real quick and make sure we're okay. I'll check it in a little bit on the louder section, but okay. So we have a map. So my thought is that there are basically going to be two distinct... okay, let's back up. The next stage that I need to work on, I'm not exactly sure yet. That's what I'm currently trying to figure out. One route we could take is we could go spend a few weeks working on map generation. So we could look up algorithms, we could try a few algorithms, we could try implementing them, or we could fuck around with them. But the issue is, I want to get the play-by-play of the turn feeling good, because if I have to, I'd rather set a fixed map at first to fuck around with than do generation and then not have like the second-to-second gameplay loop set up. So I think the next thing I want to do is behavior, and so I need to figure out the minimum amount of information I need to prep for the map system for the behavior system to start working. And so what I think I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a little 20 by 20 square, and then we're going to probably at some point spawn in walls of particular indexes, and then that way we can like test line of sight and things like that. And then otherwise I want to go into behavior, because the behavior is going to take up a lot of our processing power, and I don't want to I want to make sure that is working off the bat. So I think that's what I'm going to do, and we'll kind of see where we go from there. So let's start with this. Now, I don't remember how much we've talked about this. My mental image for the AI is that it's going to be a something akin to a chess engine, where basically the enemy is always going to conceptualize that the player is going before them. So it's going to kind of take that account, like black is accounting for white going first, and then it's going to create a list of potential world states, and then it's going to calculate out what it wants it to be. So, for example, if we're in the player's turn, right, or we're about to start the player's turn, I say, right? About to start the player's turn, in that scenario, we are queuing processing where player will go, then enemy. So this is for an enemy reaction, right? We're conceptualizing, okay, if the enemy is going to react here, what are they going to do? So that's going to happen. And then, and so its job is just to make sure, hey, could we react to a given set of moves? Like, so we'll create a data set of each action the player could take in each relevant direction, and then we're going to check to see if, how do we phrase this? We're going to check to see if the world states are unique, right? So we don't want to iterate. The computation for this is going to be really expensive. We don't want to iterate over unique world states. So we're going to have to check. So it could be that doing the nothing action and doing the think action have no change on the world state, right? Because the think action, let's say it like opens the mini-map or something, I don't know. Whatever non like related to the world state possible action that could create. Or a good example might be like, let's say that we, for some reason, the player is allowed to give 2 actions before the enemy will go next. So maybe it's swing once and then move right, as opposed to do nothing and then move right, because there's nothing they could hit, right? So like these two world states are basically identical, assuming that the player's stamina hasn't dropped by the swing. If it has, then they would be unique world states. But if not, then they're the same world state. We could collapse those in together, and then when we go to process our responses to those world states, we can make them the same, basically. So we need to get a list of potential world states. Valid potential world states. Then for each world state, we need to conceptualize out what we would do next. So there has to be some type of consideration at world state with an optimal move. And then, so wait, with an optimal move is not useful. That's not a... We need to consider a world state, and then we need to sort by optimal. Yeah, I think that would be what I'd want to say. And then we would do this to loop to depth, not depth, depth x. And then once we've looped to depth x, then we... I don't know. What would we do next? Well, then what would happen is the player would finish their input, right? So if it's the player's turn, let's say the player swings at the enemy. Cool. We know grab the world state where player swings at enemy, and we check to see if our first action in our priority list is valid. And the reason that they might not be valid is because there could be other enemies that might do things, right? So let's imagine that 2 enemies are in the scene, and the player goes to swing at the one in the front, and the one in the front wants to hop backward. Well, when they go to hop backward, another enemy also wants to go there, to their space. So now they can't go there, or maybe they're given prio. I have to figure out how prio is working. I think I'm just going to do it by, like, boss, then elite, then minion, like a tier list of unit priority. But whatever it is, basically we'll need to make sure that their action is still valid, because the world states that they're going to be considering are not including each other's actions. That is I think that's going to be too much for the enemy to process. I feel like that's going to cause us too many issues. So instead what we can do is we can cheat, hopefully, where we only check what the player is going to do, and then we just, at choice time, let player pick the world state, and then at choice process, sorry, fuck. I'm trying to think of how I'm going to manage the memory on this, because this could get incredibly expensive very quickly. Okay. At choice, process the check loop through actions by priority, or by optimal, and pick first valid. So I think that's probably something like that. And then we would clear out that array, and we would start over, basically. Okay, and then if it's the other time is the thing is about to start the enemy's turn. So when we're about to start the enemy's turn, what this means is after so this is in preparation to the player's turn. Fuck. Every time I think about this, it makes me have to scratch my head for a second, because we're doing it a turn ahead of when it's going to happen. And so I'm trying to remember when the end point is that we start at. So when we're starting before the player's turn, we're ending right after the enemy has set their reaction, if they have one, and the animation has started playing. And then we're conceptualizing, or no, this is just after the... Fuck, hold on. Enemy turn. Player react. Player turn, enemy react. Yeah, okay. And then it's, and then we go back to enemy turn. Okay. So, the second that enemy does its reaction, and we start the animations for that, we then start prepping enemy turn. The second the enemy turn is finished, we start prepping for enemy react. So that means that one of them is going to be 0 change, and the other is going to be 2. I don't think I can get it to where it's 1 and 1. Maybe we can condense these so that it does depth 2 and thus caches depth 2. Because on this one to this one, once we've dumped our turn and we're going to start enemy turn, if we could do both of these in this time, that would be huge. Because then trying to process the algorithm all the way over again between here and here is going to be annoying as fuck. But then once we... One, two, here, and here, and then 1, 2. Yeah, I guess theoretically. I guess theoretically we only have to queue the enemy processors once a cycle. We don't have to do it twice, because we could just start both of them at the end of the enemy turn for both the react and the turn. And then we... And then we can just here grab the thing from the people that can react, and then here grab the things from the people whose turn is next. And then the second that this ends, we just start it over again. So if you can react to this, or no, we'll need a heuristic. And if you qualify for that low bar heuristic, then you get able to be considered, and then we just eliminate from the tree the options that you wouldn't be able to respond to, right? So let's imagine we have a zombie, and let's imagine we have a player, and let's imagine that the player has 2 actions in their 12 actions, or no, let's say that they have 6 actions. Let's say that there's 2 actions in their 6 actions that the enemy zombie can react to. They're slow enough, right? And then let's imagine that in these things that, you know, 4 of those world states don't change between each other or aren't that different enough for the system to care, then we now have, you know, 8 or something world states that we'll check against, as opposed to all, you know, input direction times actions, what, 54? So yeah, I think that's how we'll... I like this plan, actually. Let me double check the turn system. So I think I technically have it set up to schedule 2 different enemy behavior cycles. Let me pull up that notepad again. Okay. Oh no, this is turn system. I want action system. Here we go. Because this is what hops us over to the behavior. So the 2 spots that are hopping us over to the behavior right now are enemy react and enemy turn. So what we're going to do is we're going to disable the one on enemy react. And we're just going to make the behavior system better on enemy turn to allow for this. So let's look at behavior system data. We have a list of active enemy IDs, and we have a valid action set. Okay, so the issue is that valid actions will need to be tied to a world state, because let's imagine that we're enemy turn, right? So the idea is that once we start enemy turn, we're going to prep for next enemy react and enemy turn. So what that means is that here and here, that we'll need a different world state for each, right? Because we can imagine there's going to be a list of valid actions here, and then based on that, there's going to be a list of valid actions here. So what we need to do is, we'll need to check this and then do a subsplit. So it's going to be, we're going to need a world state per valid action. I don't know why I'm writing it like this. We're going to need a world state per valid action on this react. And then for each of those, we'll need a sub-world state for each of these. And then we're going to trim that tree such that by the end, we're going to check that end world state and compare it to the end world state of the other, and we'll need to see if it's how different it is from all the other world states. And then we need to eliminate all the crossover. And then fuck. Okay. And then the next question is, how big is the depth? Because, like, God, this is just getting wildly exponential. Because I'm just trying to imagine, like, on a chess engine, the really nice thing about a chess engine is that you can prep, 8-10 moves ahead of time. But doing that here is brutal. I mean, I guess it's not too much different in a way. It's just the logic that's a bit different. Okay. Let's do... I think the big first thing... Okay, so the to-do. We need to create a world state idea. What the fuck is a world state? Then we need to... and that will need to account for units in the region, the positions on the map, stamina, health, available actions, there was something that I saw on the when I was looking into the let me make sure that OBS is working still. Okay. There was something I saw on the chess coding front that looked really interesting, or that I think I need to look into. And I never have messed with it before. It was called like a transpose table, I think. And it's basically like the modification from the current world state to that world state. And that sounds really important for this. So I'm not creating a shit ton of memory for all of this. Let's see, coding a chess engine. There was a wiki that I saw that people were using. Chess programming wiki, this one. God, is there a fucking dark mode for this before I show this? I don't think there is. Okay. Hold on 1 second. Let me, they change this to that. And bam. Okay. Oh, it's a little too big. That should be good enough. And the music isn't too loud, so that works. I'll just turn down a little bit, just make sure. Alright, and then we hop back into the chats. Alright, everything is good to go. Alright, let's get back to this. So, yep, getting started. If you're new to chess programming, yep, yeah, I am. Foundations of a chess engine is the board representation. Yep, that's the back end of a chess engine, which controls how it tracks the board and the rules of the game. The very first step of writing it is to write a complete, bug-free board representation that knows every rule of chess. While this can sometimes be a pain, especially implementing the more complicated rules such as castling and repetition draws, is the backbone of the chess engine. Your engine will not get far without it. Debugging tests such as perf-t can be used in verifying correctness of move generation. When writing an engine, it is important to write bug-free code. The best strategy when starting a new engine is to create a debugging framework under it so that every single piece of code is tested, no matter how simple it looks. Many experienced engine authors have ended up rewriting their engines because they have become unmanageable due to bugs. Interesting. Okay, let's start with board representation. A chess program needs an internal board representation to maintain chess positions for its search, evaluation, and gameplay. Besides modeling the chessboard with its piece placement, some additional information is required to fully specify a chess position, such as side to move, castling rights, possibly en passant target, square, and the number of reversible moves to keep track of on the 50-move rule. To begin with, we further elaborate on pure data structures to represent the board and its piece placement. There are piece-centric and square-centric representations, as well as hybrid solutions. A piece-centric representation keeps lists, arrays, or sets of all pieces still on the board with the association number information which square they occupy. A popular piece-centric representative is the setwise bit board approach. 164-bit word for each piece type, where 1 bit associates their occupancy. The square-centric representation implements the inverse association. Is a square empty, or is it occupied by a particular piece? The most popular square-centric representations, Mailbox or its OX88 enhancements, are basically arrays of direct piece codes, including the empty square and possibly out-of-board codes. Hybrid solutions may further refer piece list entries. So one thing I think we can do, which I was thinking about, is for our representation of the world state, currently our tiles are bits, or bytes I should say, where I currently have four flags allocated for bits 8, 7, 6, and 5, but I'm saving 4 through 1 in case I want to store extra stuff in them, and then I'm making it read-only. But I wonder if what we could do is when we go to... We currently only are allowing for 255 units in the game at a time, so a byte worth of enemies. And technically 255 enemies because the player is one of those entities. But if we do it that way, then I wonder if it would be I wonder if we could... Sorry, I was just getting sidetracked. I wonder if we can store the world states as ints, where the first byte is like the tile, the second byte is the unit ID on that tile if there is one, the third byte is, I don't know, maybe like relevant possible conditions or something that you could flag, and then there's like a fourth byte that we do. And so we compress it down into an int worth, and so that way it would be easier to iterate through. Because unfortunately, unlike chess, we do not have less than... how many pieces are there possible? It's empty plus pawn, king, queen, bishop, knight, rook on for one side, and then the same thing on the other. So there's like 16, I think, combinations or something. Like, we have way more. So I'm wondering if we could, if we could like organize it that way, and so then we are able to properly, I don't know, sort it in. I don't know. That's my theory. While different algorithms and tasks inside checkers prefer one of these switchings, it's quite common to use redundant board representations of elements of both. Bitboard approaches often keep an 8x8 board to determine a piece by square, while square-centric board arrays approach typically keep piece lists and or piece sets to avoid scanning the board for move generation purposes. I don't know if I understand that. Bitboard approaches often keep an 8x8 board to determine a piece by square. While square-centric board arrays approach typically keep piece lists. List of array of up to all 32 pieces on the board. Likely, type and color of pieces are associated for a certain index range or disjoint list arrays. Each element of the list or array for each particular piece associates the square occupied by the space, or by this piece. So, getting the... I need to turn this down to my end, it's a little distracting right now. An array of 32 bytes for each possible piece. This pieceless traversal, for instance, in move generation is straight forward or backward. For int p is equal to 0, p is less than in white rooks. From square is equal to white underscore rook underscore list p plus plus. I am not following. I'm gonna be totally honest. Okay. Incremental update is demonstrated by making RB5 to B8. So rook at B5 to B8. Rook at A8 takes B8, concerning the white rook list and the index board, ignoring the black list and piece array. Since removing a captured piece is done by copying the last piece of the list to fill the gap of the removed piece, sure. But inserting is unmake is done by appending at the end of the list. The piece list of one piece type may be stuffed in random order, yielding and change moved order and seeing randomly producing different results. Okay, so this is for making moves. So white rook list and white rooks is equal to 2, 0, and 1. So these are the two white rooks. Make RB5 to B8. So we set B5 to B8. Okay, I understand. And then when on taking on B8, oh, when taken on B8, we set it equal to the other. Why do we do that? Index is equal to white index board B8. I'm not getting that. I'm gonna be honest. List array of up to 32 pieces in the board. So our version of piece list is going to be that's our byte ID, right? That's our 0 to 255 ID, the value that we have on each unit. However, theoretically, if we're not taking this chunk of the whole map, we might be able to reduce that number down to the relevant IDs for the calculation, right? So like, let's say that we're only allowing you to take, or let's say the algorithm only takes like a, I don't know, 20 by 20 tile chunk around the relevant area. Well, then you might just ID them by, okay, I am entity 0, that's entity 1, that's entity 2, that's entity 3, and because it's, I don't know, in this chunk, I can assume that it's going to never be higher than 64 or whatever. And we can just shrink that down into 3 bits or 4 bits or something. Okay, board representation. With a board representation, one big consideration is the generation of moves. Yeah. Write a good move generator is often the first basic step of creating a chess engine. Pseudo-legal and legal move generation. In pseudo-legal move generation, pieces obey their normal rules of movement, but they're not checked beforehand to see if they'll leave the king in check. It is left up to the move-making function to test the move. Okay. So what it's offering is, instead of validating the actions at every stage, we instead just do it for all actions and then check to see if it's valid in the moment. That sounds more expensive, honestly, but I guess it's less that you're doing in each world state, so maybe it's not as expensive. In legal move generation, as the name implies, only legal moves are generated, which means extra time must be spent to make sure the king isn't going to be left or placed in check after each move. Pins are the main difficulty, particularly where en passant is involved. Interesting. Most programs use special move generators for the quiescence? How the fuck do you say this?
Quiescence.
Quiescence. Most programs use special move generators for the quiescence search, and that means inactivity or dormancy. Okay, hold on. What the fuck is a quiescent search? Most shops at the end of the main search perform a move-limited quiescent search containing fewer moves. The purpose for this is to only evaluate quiet positions, or positions where there are no winning tactical moves to be made. This search is needed to avoid the horizon effect. What the fuck is the... God damn it. Okay, we're learning today. Today is a day of learning. The horizon effect is caused by the depth limitation of the search algorithm and becomes manifest when some negative event is inevitable but postponable. So this is the issue that I'm worried about right now, which is the idea that, let's imagine that there is a Indiana Jones ball rolling down the hallway, and the enemy is currently engaged with the player in melee. Now, if we fast forwarded 10 turns, we would know that we're going to fucking die unless we immediately start booking it for an adjacent doorway. But because we're fucking stupid, we keep fighting them, which then gets us killed and gets the player killed. And because we can only conceptualize 4 turns ahead of time, and by the time the 4th turn comes around, we can't get to the doorway. And this would be stupid looking from our perspective, because as the player, you're like, oh, fuck, that's a ball. And then you're watching an enemy just be like, oh, but I don't care. I'm going to still fight you. And it looks fucking stupid. So this would be like an example of this, where we're postponing an inevitable. We're not conceptualizing an inevitable until it's hitting us, I think. Because only a partial game tree has been analyzed. It will appear to the system that the event can be avoided when in fact it is not the case. Oh, wait, no, this is different. This is saying, well, I guess it's similar. The horizon effect is caused by depth limitation of the search algorithm because it manifests when some negative event is inevitable but postponable. Because only a partial game tree has been analyzed, it will appear to the system that the event can be avoided. Oh, so what it's saying is the enemy can turn around to fight the player, but they'll lose. So they keep running with the eventual hope that they won't... They keep thinking it'll eventually be able to get away. Because it can't see far enough from the future, it doesn't know that it can't. I'm trying to think... Horizon effect, I feel like, is useful, or I feel like is more likely to happen in a game with perfect information. But for this game, I feel like I would want that behavior. Like, if an enemy can't see past 10 turns into the future, and they're just fucking running from the player, and because that's all they can do, I don't know if I want them to realize that they're fucking doomed. I think I'm okay with letting them... Maybe once they're cornered, then they, turn around and will start, lashing out. That's a last ditch. But I think I'm okay with that behavior case. Besides obligatory quiescence search, extensions, specifically check extensions, are determined to... Okay, hold on. Let's see an example. An unresolved defect of chess programs is the insertion of delaying moves that may cause an inevitable loss of material to occur beyond the program's horizon, so that the loss is hidden. Thus, the horizon is said to occur when the delaying moves unnecessarily weaken the position or give up additional material to postpone the eventual loss. The effect is less apparent in programs with more knowledgeable quiescent searches, but all programs exhibit this phenomena. There are many illustrations of this difficulty. The example in Figure 4, which is based off a study by Kindle, is clear. Kindle. Here's a program with a simple quiescent search involving only captures, would assume that any blocking move saves the queen. Oh, I see. So, it's like, oh, we'll move a pawn. Okay, we take. Oh, we'll move a pawn. Okay, we take. Oh, we'll move a pawn. And at some point, it is no... You're just going to lose all the pawns and the queen eventually. Right? Because if they move this pawn to block, then you take. And now you're in the exact same spot. Even worse now. Yeah, okay. I think I might still have to care about this then. Okay. The purpose of the search is to evaluate quiet positions or positions where there are no winning tactical moves to be made. This search is needed to avoid the horizon effect. Simply stopping your search when you reach the desired depth and then evaluate is very dangerous. Oh. Consider the situation where your last move you consider is queen takes pawn. If you stop there and evaluate, you might think you've won a pawn, but what if you were to search one move deeper and find out that the next move is pawn takes queen? If you didn't win a pawn, you actually lost the queen. Hence, the need to make sure that you're evaluating only quiet positions. Despite the fact that the quiescent searches are typically very short, about 50% nodes are 50 to 90% nodes are spent there, so it's worthwhile to apply some pruning there. Apart from not trying moves with the static exchange formula, your static exchange evaluation is less than 0, delta pruning can be used for that effect. I don't understand that sentence, but we'll get back to this. Some standing pat in order to allow the quiescent search to save lives. Okay. So I understand that this could be an issue, or that this will be an issue moving forward, and I will get back to this. Okay, so we're back here. Most programs use special move generators for the quiescent search, sometimes supplemented by 1 for getting out of check. Oh, they might use a different move gen for check. Oh, I didn't even consider that. We could do a move gen for combat versus stealth. Right? Because when the player's not in combat, then it's the enemy looking for the player. Because, you know, it's a survival horror game. They're walking around, they're trying to find them. So we could make that 2 distinct move gens. That's really interesting. Because that might cut down on our list of potential nonsense. What if we gave every action a tag of, like, relevant in combat and or relevant in search or relevant out of combat, and then we can just conceptualize it that way? Well, so here's the issue, right? Let's imagine that we have a let's imagine that we have an enemy, right? And let's imagine that the enemy is not aware that where the player is. So let's imagine that the enemy's walking down a hallway, and around the corner, the player is fighting another enemy. Now, when the enemy moves up into the hallway, they will see the player and then get swapped over into combat, but they don't see them yet. When the enemy is conceptualizing their next 2 actions, they should only be conceptualizing... Well, they should be conceptualizing almost nothing as they move because they're not reacting to anything. But then they need to immediately begin conceptualizing the combat version once that world state occurs. So I guess we could evaluate it at each instance which moveset we're doing. So like the pseudocode would be on evaluation if enemy is aware of player dot position, or is aware of player validate combat actions, else validate non-combat. Because one of the things I think I want to make sure that the system does, which I feel like makes a lot of sense, is the idea that you should not be doing reactions if you are not aware of enemies. Like, it's not an extra turn, it's a reaction. So I need to figure out how to limit the player, because that could get weird. But I know for sure I want to limit the enemies. So if the enemies are not aware of the player, the enemies are not doing reactions, which will tone down non-combat trees a good bit. But that's I like this idea. Let me make a note of that. 2 different action validators, 1 for combat, 1 for stealth, maybe a 3rd for other case. These special cases can be made more efficient than generating and testing each possible move to fit specific criteria. Yeah, of course, that makes sense. For example, if the king is in check, the only possible legal moves are to capture the attacking piece, block the attacker if it is a ray piece. Okay, yeah, that's like the bishops or the rooks or anything like a line that they're focusing. Or move the king to safety. Special generators for the quiescent search might want to generate checks in addition to captures and promotions. That makes sense. They can use the fact that a knight or bishop must start off the same color square as the opponent king if they are able to attack it, and rooks can only generate at most 2 checking moves to the squares with the rook's column and the king's row, or the king's column and the rook's row. Similar tricks can be used for generating possible moves out of check, which must be the king capturing the opponent's checking piece or blocking its attack if it's a ray piece. When in double check, only king moves are permitted. Yeah, you could even prune that even more. And then you can also probably do evaluations based on which validator you would do, right? So let's imagine that an enemy has a smoke bomb and it conceptualizes all of the actions it could do. Well, if it's already in combat with the player and it wants to keep going because it has the advantage, and it checks to see the validator and realizes that throwing the smoke bomb would put it out of combat, then it probably would be unincentivized, decentivized. Is that the word? Just decentivized? Decentivized. Yeah, okay, it is the word.
Disincentivize.
Disincentivized, but it's insensitive. Okay, disincentivized. 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 Okay. Yeah, the enemy might be like disincentivized from using the smoke bomb because it knows that it will set it into the wrong thing. In a similar way, the chess engine might realize that it's going to put it in double check, and then it will cancel out or not consider it unless it has to or something like that. With move ordering in mind, or no, but it should still conceptualize it because it might be better long term. So you probably still do want to do it, even if it doesn't. You don't really want to do it. You have to check all of the depth, so it's not really worth it to deprioritize it. With move ordering in mind, chess programs while traversing... What is move ordering? For the alpha-beta algorithm to perform well, don't know what that is yet, the best moves need to be searched first. Yes. This is especially, well, I would assume so. This is especially true for PV nodes and expected cut nodes. The goal is to become close to the minimal tree. Yes. On the other hand, at cut nodes, the best move is not always the cheapest refutation. Yeah, that makes sense. So, like, the best move might not be in the obvious tree. Like, let's imagine you're ahead in combat, and so you're like, I don't want to throw the smoke bomb. But if you throw the smoke bomb, then the player starts choking and they get forced out of their fucking corner that they prepped a trap in or something. Um, See for further instance, enhanced transposition cutoff. Okay. This sounds this sounds really important for one. Okay. Most important inside an iterative deepening framework is to try the principal variation of the previous iteration as the leftmost path for the next iteration, which might be applied by explicit triangular PV table or implicit by the transposition table. Okay. I don't understand this back half, and I kind of understand the front half, but I think this is exactly what I'm looking for. Okay, let me give me a second. I'm gonna go to the bathroom, and then we'll come back and keep working on this. So I'm gonna disable that so that you can see the AFK button, and I'll be right back. Alright, I'm back. Let me drop the music down a bit. Okay, turn off this AFK screen. Re-enable the Chrome tab. And we're back. The alpha beta algorithm. The A-B pruning or A-B heuristic is a significant enhancement to the min-max search algorithm that eliminates the need to search large portions of the game tree, applying a branch and bound technique. Remarkably, it does this without any potential of overlooking or better move. Okay, I'm listening. If one already has found a quite good move and searches for alternatives, one refutation is enough to avoid it. No need to look for even stronger refutations. The algorithm maintains two values, alpha and beta. They represent the minimum score that the maximizing player is assured of, and the maximum score that the minimizing player is assured of. Consider the following example. Say it's white's turn to move, and we are searching to a depth of 2. That is, we consider all of white's moves and all of black's responses to each of those moves. Okay. First, we must pick one of white's possible moves. Let's call this possible move number 1. We consider this move and every possible response to this move by black. After this analysis, we determine that the result of making possible move 1 is an even position. Then we move on and consider another of white's possible moves. When we consider that first possible counter move by black, we discover that playing this result is black winning a rook. In this situation, we could safely ignore all of black's other responses to possible move number 2, because we already know that possible move number 1 is better. Okay. We don't really care about exactly how much worse possible move number 2 is. Maybe another possible response wins a queen, but it doesn't matter, because we know that we can achieve at least an even game by playing possible move number 1. The full analysis of possible move number 1 gave us a lower bound. We know that we can achieve it at least that, so anything that is clearly worse can be ignored. This situation becomes even more complicated, however, when we go to a search depth of 3 or greater, because now both players can make choices affecting the game tree. Now we have to maintain both a lower bound and an upper bound, called alpha and beta. We maintain a lower bound because if a move is too bad, we don't consider it. We also maintain an upper bound because if a move at depth 3 or higher leads to a continuum that is too good, the other player won't allow it, because there was a better or higher move up in the game tree that could have been played to avoid this situation. One player's lower bound is the other player's upper bound. Okay, so we are definitely going to be using this algorithm then. The savings of alpha beta can be considerate. Let's see. Depth of n is depth of 0 is 1, depth of 1 is 40, depth of 2 Christ. Depth of 3. Oh my fucking god. Yes, then I guess the question is, what is the... what's the lower case for the prune? Because, like, let's imagine that in this example, what was the example was, when we consider the first possible counter move by black, we discover that resulting in this lets the black player win a rook, right? Let's imagine that we then do depth 3, and we realize that by letting them win the rook, we actually, like, win the game. Well, then we wouldn't really... That wouldn't be a worthy shut-off point, right? This version becomes immune properly, however, when we go to a search up of 3 or greater, because now both players can make choices affecting the game tree. Correct. Now we have to maintain both a lower bound and an upper bound. We maintain a lower bound because if a move is too bad, we don't consider it. We also maintain an upper bound. So if a move at depth 3 or higher leads to a continuation that is too good, the other player won't allow it. Oh. Oh, I see. So it's saying, I understand now. Interesting. You know, I wonder if, since we're using a system here, I wonder if we can perfect information our AI. And what I mean by that is, the way that I currently have this set up is that what we're going to do is we're going to take a world state around each enemy, and then we're going to run through that enemy's processes, and we're going to figure out like what is the possible world states, and then the enemy is going to evaluate the possible world states for itself, and then it's going to figure out, oh, this is the one I want to do, and then we're going to run all the way back up to the top, and that's going to be the thing that it chooses. But then after that, it then has to validate it against what the other enemies are doing, right? Because it's not able to conceptualize what every enemy is going to do inside of itself. That's going to be an insane amount of computation. So it can only really conceptualize what the player is going to do and then build a list of actions around itself and then go from there. But I wonder instead if we could do it like a overlord AI, where the overlord AI is allowed to move X number of pieces every step, and then it conceptualizes the best way for those pieces to work together. The downsides of this is that the enemies might do behavior that is... I'm trying to think of what the weird artifacts you could get are. There's a way where you could prune the available actions to an enemy based around what that enemy is aware of, right? So if the enemy doesn't know where the player is, and there's no reason to know where the player is, then we would disable the ability for the enemy to turn 90 degrees to the right and fire an arrow. Like, we would just completely disable that action, because it doesn't know the player is there, so why the fuck would we allow it, even if it might be optimal for the engine overall to do that, to kill the player. We might prune it from the available listing such that it can't do that. Because then we would basically be replicating the idea that the enemy is acting on its own, but the benefit is now the engine is only doing the board computation and not doing each individual enemy's computation together. And now can just look at the whole board and do those board states. And then now we don't have to do an action validation when we actually get to the frame of. We can just grab the relevant board state that does take into account all of the information. kind of want to try that one, I'm not gonna lie. That one sounds incredibly interesting. Don't individually process the enemy's behavior. Build one overlord AI that is a given control over all the acting enemies and prunes out their non-considered behavior. Yeah. So, like, the example would be, imagine we're doing a real chess engine, and black is considering what it's going to do after what white does. And then let's imagine that, and then let's imagine that we go to look for all the bishop's possible moves, and the bishop has a line of sight setting on it somewhere, such that it can't move backwards. Okay, we just prune out the backwards options from its consideration, and now we have all the it's another consideration for the index of valid actions that the bishop can take. Fuck. I feel like this is gonna get... I mean, I guess it's not... It is theoretically more moves per world state, but you're doing, how to frame it? You're not, there's no overlap, right? So if it was option A, then each enemy would have, 80 instances of their own version of the world state based around their actions, and then afterwards we'd have to revalidate them anyways. But in this, we might have, a total of 500 world states split between combining all the different enemies together, and then we're just gonna pick the best one in general. That's an interesting idea. I'll have to think about that. Okay. So, yeah, we definitely want to do an alpha beta, that's for sure, because we can't deal with we can't deal with these level of, because theirs is only 40 in depth 1, as I guess that's the maximum number of possible moves in chess at any one time, and we are definitely going to be over 40. So that's gonna get incredibly fucking expensive. Max versus Min. A C-like pseudocode implementation of the algorithm with distinct, indirect, recursive routines for the max and min player, similar to the min and max routines. Making an unmoving moves is omitted, and should be done before and after the recursive calls. So called beta cutoffs occur for the max play, alpha cutoffs for the min player. Note that min-max is not used in practice due to the high amount of code duplication. So I guess my question is... sorry, this was a huge sidetrack. This line, what it's saying is, we want to cut off options that are worst for us, because why would we consider these? But it's also saying to cut off best case options for us, because why would the player ever allow that to occur? My question then is, what happens when the player fucks up and they actually do allow that? Like, you've scraped out this option. What is your solution? Because with a min cutoff, that's easy, right? We might miss better moves because we didn't realize that by sacrificing 7 pieces in a row, we wind up with checkmate. But if you're for the max solution, we have no control over whether or not the player actually chooses that. So what happens when they do choose that? I don't understand this. We also maintain an upper bound because if a move at depth 3 or higher leads to a continuation that is too good, the other player won't allow it because there was a better move higher up in the game tree that he could have made the player to avoid the situation. I wonder if any of these start with black's turn to move, so that you're responding at all the times. Because I think that changes the algorithm substantially, I think. Because if you're reacting... So in this example, or in this processing, we're going to have, basically, assuming we're white, because we're, the predominant player or whatever in this situation, and the opponent is, we'll say, black, then that means that we're calculating out a turn sequence like this, where we have to plan 2 turns. But when do we stop? Because if we're starting here, we're going to go black, black, white, white. Then do we do another... Do we continue on and do another set? Because for each 4 that we can process 1 round ahead of what we would have already done. Now we also have the question of sacrifices. If we did build an Overlord AI, the Overlord AI would be more willing to sacrifice zombies, ghosts, etc. in order to stop the player from winning. But those zombies and ghosts wouldn't necessarily want to do that themselves. So I guess we could... Maybe in the pruning process, we process out... maybe part of our minimax is we process out actions that would like actively sacrifice pieces. Depending on the sacrifice, what we could do... Oh, fuck. I'm trying to make this not crazy complicated, because it's already going to be fairly complicated. But there is a world where if we did this... Let's imagine... So, like, here's an example, right? I get to be my I get to do the game designer shorts thing of having paint out now. I hope you're proud of me. Let me swap over to OBS so that I can film paint. Which one to use OBS? Here. Okay, and then we're gonna add window capture, paint. Select a window, paint. Match title, okay. Okay. What the fuck? Why is it recording my mouse and not the strokes? What is happening? Capture cursor disabled. Okay, now we're gonna zoom this in. But now we don't see the... Why don't we see this? Oh. There we go. We need to turn capture mode off of automatic. Do I know why? No. No, I do not. Okay, so now if we hit OK, now we have it. Oh, no, do not undo that. There we go. I went to undo this. There we go. Good. And then let me... So I just make it... I guess it's fine. Maybe next time I'll zoom it in so that it's just the screen. Okay, so... Let's just imagine that we have a map, and we have the player here, and we have a boss here. And we have an enemy here. Now, the player is about to launch an arrow that's going to hit the fuck out of this boss. And if you're a god AI, the god AI says, well, this is evaluated higher. The boss does not have a way to get out of the way right now for some fucking reason. Let's imagine there's nowhere they can go. And so what we're going to do is we will send the enemy in front of the player. Now, if you're doing individual processing, the enemy is never doing this. Unless we have specifically coded this enemy to be like a bodyguard enemy. They are never throwing themselves in front of this arrow in order to save the boss. But... And then if we were doing making a god AI, the player would be like, what the fuck? Did that enemy just like... Why did this random zombie know to throw itself in front of this arrow for the boss? But if we changed it such that, like, okay, now let's imagine the boss is like a necromancer or a vampire lord or something. Now, what if we did what if when we process this, we said, hey, this is now noted as a sacrifice that the enemy is doing for the boss. We might be able to, like, animate out. Maybe the boss has a sacrifice order animation where they, like, order the enemy to get in their way or to, like, block for them. And so we just make that an animation that plays, even though it doesn't contribute at all to the action economy. What it does do is it sets in mind the idea that that we could order him in order to do this. I guess theoretically, if you wanted this behavior in the individual, then you would give the boss an action that allows them to order enemies, and then you'd replicate the same thing and just remove the enemy's ability to process actions. Well, no, you would still end up going through the entirety of the enemy's processing, but then when you went to choose the valid action list, the boss would go first and tell the enemy to order what to do, and so then the enemy would lose out on all of the processing power we did for that enemy. But if we do it for a god AI, the issue that we run into is, let's imagine that the boss is, let's imagine that the boss AI has an issue where, the boss is like blinded or stunned or knocked unconscious or some other status condition that would make it impossible for them to give this order. We don't want to end up playing that animation unless they're able to. So we would have to now make an exception list based around conditions. And I guess you could do that. I guess you could do that if the enemy, if we still gave the boss the action, and then we started each iteration of the branch with what the boss does before all of the entities. So we do like our god AI, I really like this idea the more I play with it, and I wonder if there's a way to make this work. So let's imagine we have our god AI. Step 1 would be validate. And so then we would figure out who is our best agent in the validation. So we went through all the player's actions. Oh, well, the boss can't react because the boss isn't aware the player's doing anything right now. Or they're not even in combat. Okay, who's the next? Our knight. Okay, the knight is now our starting point. So our knight is an elite unit. Everything will be elite unit or below. So now we don't have to consider the boss order option. But maybe the knight has like a command vampire spawn action. And so we could still do that here and then move that thing for this without with as an option, because you would still make it an action, but now you would just make it you would just have to do it from, like, the pawns are never ordering other pawns, I don't think. Or I guess if they did, you would just conceptualize out that world space where one of them does order the other. Like if there's like a tag team duo or something, then you could do that. I really like the idea of this god AI. Like, being able to actually code it like a chess algorithm where the enemy has like an overlord that's operating and you're not just individually managing each enemy's AI. I feel like that's going to reduce bullshit in the computation and possible bugs and all kinds of issues so much more than if you had to individually process every single enemy and then revalidate and then double check and then... yeah, fuck. Okay. What time is it? I did not eat much today. I'm gonna go put on the oven real quick and cook up a pizza. Be right back. Go back to paint. And let's do the AFK screen. Alright. Oven's on. I'll have to remember to do that at some point soon. But I'm pretty hungry, so shouldn't have too much of an issue. Okay. Let's keep reading. For the alpha beta algorithm to perform well, the best moves need to be searched first. Yes. So I guess, in a way, what we're doing is we're basically starting the alpha beta algo off with queen moves, or with an rook move. Which in chess, that might not be optimal because you don't always want the queen to move. But if you can move the queen and the rook and the pawn at the same time, well, then you probably do want to start with the queen because you want the most impactful action to occur first. Now, the pawn might eventually have a better action available, and the queen could then do something else, but you'd still probably, on average, start with the queen and then work your way through. So I guess, in a way, this is probably the best way to do this. Okay, I think I'm committed. I'm feeling more and more to commit to this idea, but I don't know if there's a good reason that I wouldn't want to do it this way. God. The day my voice stops cracking, the day I'll be so fucking happy. Holy shit. Bum bum bum. Yeah. I think part of the issue is that just I feel like when I talk to myself, I feel like my voice is different than when I talk to other people. I feel like that ends up happening on stream. And I wonder if that's what causes more voice cracks. I don't know. Okay, so we looked at alpha beta. Move ordering. The best move. Especially true for PV nodes and expected cut nodes. What are PV nodes? Oh wait, was this just further? No, okay. Node types. Node types are classifications of nodes as expected inside a minimal alpha beta tree. So these types were first formulated by Donald Knuth and Ronald Moore when it's describing the alpha beta algorithm, and further analyzed by J.J. Pearl. While Knuth used the terms type 1, 2, and 3, Tony Marsland and Fred Popwich introduced the more descriptive terms PV, cut, and all nodes. Node types are established by the search that are stored inside the transposition table. Okay, the transposition table. That was one of the things that we started this with. I want to look into that at some point. Indicating whether the score is either exact, lower, or upper bounded. Expected node types, as determined by tree topology, probing the transposition table, or comparing scores of static evaluation, considering threats, or even a reduced search, may be considered by various parallel search algorithms and decisions concerning selectivity. PV nodes are nodes that have a score that end up being inside the window. So if the bounds passed are AB, but the score returned SASB, the nodes all have all moves searched and have value returned as exact, which propagates up to the root along with the principal variation. Oh, I guess that's true. When you get a value that's inside of your bounds, now your bounds have to shrink. But the question is, does it go up or does it go down? Right? Because, like, let's say that our minimum score that we want for our turn is 3, and our upper score that we want is 8. If we get passed in a 5, does that mean we're now at 3 to 5, or does that mean we're now at 5 to 8? Root node and leftmost nodes are always PV nodes. That makes sense, because your bounds aren't established next yet. Cut nodes, otherwise known as fail high nodes, are nodes in which a beta cutoff was performed. Okay, so these are nodes where S is greater than or equal to B, and these are going to be S is less than or equal to A. So these are nodes where the player is not going to allow you to get away with bullshit. And then these are the nodes where you don't want to do something so fucking stupid. Okay. In principal variation search, cut nodes are searched with null windows. A null window, also called a zero window, scout window, or narrow window, is a way to reduce the search space in an alpha beta like search algorithm to perform a Boolean test whether a move produces a worse or better score than the past value. Oh, okay, so this is what I was asking about then. So the question I had was, what if we, or in that example, where the rook dies, and so, or no, what if we're in the scenario where the we go to do something that is really good for us, but the player would never do it because they're not fucking stupid. What this does is it checks to see if the subscores, we still search the subscore, but now we do it with a window of, is the, just a binary, is the score higher or lower than our current? And that's, I guess, the way, hold on, let me look at this more. As I'm describing it, I'm just like, I need to understand it more. Okay, principal variation search. An enhancement to alpha beta based on null or zero window search of non-PV nodes to prove a move is worse or not than an already safe score. The idea: in most of the nodes, we need just a bound, proving that a move is unacceptable for us or for the opponent and not the exact score. This is needed in only so-called principal variation, a sequence of moves acceptable to both players, i.e. not causing a beta cutoff anywhere in the path, which is expected to propagate down to the root. If a lower depth search has already established such a sequence, finding a series of moves whose value is greater than the alpha, but lower than the beta throughout the search branch, the chances that are deviating from us will do no good. So in a PV node, only the first move is searched in the full window in order to establish the expected node value. Oh, so it's saying we full search the first node. We have some way to sort the nodes by some heuristic. And then we full search the first one, and then we binary search the next one to see if the points are going to be better or worse than we already have. And if they are, then we go check them. That's what they're saying. Yeah, so all siblings of a PV node are expected cut nodes. And then the child of a cut node is an all node. A beta cutoff score occurs in the alpha beta algorithm if the score backed up by the search is greater than or equal to beta and fails high. No further moves need to be searched, since one refutation is always sufficient to avoid the move that leads to this node or position. Nodes where a beta cutoff occurs are then cut nodes, where move ordering was crucial to try the refutation move as early as possible. Typically, as first move in 90-95% of all cases, in max versus min alpha beta, a beta cutoff can only occur for the max player, while the min player cuts it below or equal alpha. It's the most common nega-max implementation, makes both players maximizers. Nega-max alpha beta has beta cutoffs exclusively for both players. Yeah, I guess I just don't understand. So does that mean that when... Let's say that Stockfish looks at a list of moves and says, oh, this move is fucking stupid. We're not even going to consider it, because why would you do that? And then your dumbass does that move. Does it then have to just recompute with that move in mind? Okay. Okay, let's reread this. So the principal child of a cut node. The child of a cut node. So what do you start the window at? Well, I guess because it's negative infinity to infinity, or whatever the score valuation would be. So you start at negative infinity to infinity. Then you set the PV node. And then you have to modify. You then set the new window to be your min and your max for that node. And then all ones to the right of it would then be cut nodes, where, or expected to be cut nodes, where you go to process it assuming that it's not going to be, that the player is not going to have a better response than this. Or no, that it won't go better for you. We assume this is the best action for us. Because then we go to check these, and if it's so much better for us, wait, no, I don't understand. Cut nodes, always known as fail high nodes, are nodes in which an alpha or beta cutoff was performed. So with bounds A, B, S is greater than or equal to B, a minimum of one move and a cut node needs to be searched. Hold on. I'm going to see if I can find a video where someone talks about this, because I'm kind of curious to see what that looks like. I think for board representation, I think the one I want to go for is board specific. We can check them, but the issue is I just have too many types of pieces. Because unfortunately, if you think about it, chess pieces are in a binary state of either alive or dead. And so a zombie with 2 health is a different piece than a zombie with 4 health. It just is. It's able to do trades differently, so it should have a different consideration for what it's allowed to do. There's just a whole host of things that zombie might be able to do, or might be able to live through, or might be able to consider, that a 2 health zombie is not. Same thing if there was a hunger bar or a stamina bar or whatever the fuck. So it's not in the same world of consideration. So I feel like piece-centric things can't happen for me because there's just too many turn variations or piece variations. But I wonder what we could do is if we could find a way to compress relevant agent data into a consolidated form. Whenever we go to process world states, we can just, in the same way that when a piece is captured, we swap it, if we could swap that instance at that location. Which I guess theoretically you could do for the piece one, but hold on, let me see. Let me look at this. Piece lists. List of arrays or pieces up to 32. Yeah, this is like an array of all the pieces. I don't really think that that's a good idea for this. Piece sets. A set-wise representation of 1 bit for each piece. Okay, that is way too... The square-centric representation implements an inverse association. Is a square empty or is it occupied by a particular piece? The most popular square-centric mailbox. Okay, what is mailbox? It's a square-centric board representation where the encoding of every square resides in a separate addressable memory element, usually an element of an array or a random access. The square number, or its file and rank, acts like an address to a postbox, which might be empty or may contain a chess piece. Yeah, so I think this is what I was talking about in this was where did I write this down, or did I just mention it earlier? But it was the idea of splitting a tile or tile for a world state into an int where byte 1 is tile and then byte 2 is agent, right? So that would be our address in this case, I think. Although I feel like we probably would need more bytes for that. Pros. Easy, straightforward to understand and implement. Suitable with the same efficiency for any size of board. From one can be fitted on 64-bit integers to much larger. Multiple chess variants with board sizes are quite different. Oh, interesting. Suitable for almost all chess tasks in software and computing speed is not a high requirement. Uh-oh. In the view of developing chess engines, programming must use many loops and branch commands, such as for and while, if comparable with bit boards. Hard to store patterns and match them. May have some inefficient high-frequency use functions, such as finding key locations in check. Not efficient to generate moves in stages, since generating all moves captures only non-captures may take quite similar periods. So I guess this is what they were talking about, the piece list, is even if you use a board representation, you might have a piece list on the side that does all of your... Well, yeah, but at that point, you might as well do piece-centric. So the piece-centric, I think what they're getting at is, the piece-centric has a reference to a copy of the board, but it doesn't actually put the entities. Oh, we have a bot. Hold on. /ban bot. There we go. Yeah. So what it's saying is for a piece-centric board, you have a reference to the original board, which is unmovable. Right? Like, we have a read-only board in this case. And then you just feed in a set of entities and then just hold their index from where they are on the board and then do the math computation around it. So, instead of, like, checking, you know, for the knight's move, you would have to check, you know, where is the knight? Okay, here's the knight. And then we're going to check, you know, up 2 to the left or up 2, 1 to the left, and then up 2, 1 to the right. And instead of doing that, we instead just say, here's the knight, here's where it is, do the math for +2 + 1, +2 - 1, so on and so forth. Okay. Then I think piece-centric, I was wrong then. Because, yeah, with the mailbox, you're going to have to... The second that you get a piece list, you're going to have to do basically what the piece-centric is doing anyways. And I already have a board that I don't really want to mute. So then, yes. That is the better option. Technically, there is a world where there is some mutable data, but that's built around... Like if I flip a lever and a trap door opens, where there's like gonna be like a table that sits on top of whatever's happening in the scene in order to calculate that. So I think that's fine. Okay. Let's look at the piece-centric options. Bitboard. Also called bit sets or bitmaps or better square sets are among other things that are used to represent a board inside a chess program in a piece-centric manner. Bitboards are in essence finite sets of up to 64 elements, all the squares of a chessboard, 1 bit per square. Other board games with greater board sizes may use set-wise representation as well, but classical chess has the advantage that one 64-bit word or register covers the whole board. Even more bitboard friendly is checkers with 32-bit boards and less piece types than chess. To represent the board, we typically need 1 bit board for each piece type and color. Okay, so what it's saying is, if I understand this correctly, is for each enemy type, so in this case it would be like, the basic example, because this would be chess, is that we have, let's say we have like, I don't know, white knight. Okay, well, white knight is going to have a 64-bit array, and in positions, I don't know, 5 and 30 are the 2 tiles that the white knight exists at. But I need to figure out a way to. Okay, so the big complication one that we have to do here is that my piece set is much higher, but there's overlap. So yeah, if the enemy knows, the issue is that because there's only one of each type, you're only ever going to have 1 bit active. And so then how do you... What do we do with the rest of this? Fuck. Okay, so fuck, and then I want to use more than 64 squares. I feel like I'm gonna have to. Yeah, fuck. Oh god, this gets so complicated. Yeah, to represent the board structure, we need to put in one bit board for each piece type and color. Likely encapsulated inside a class or structure, or as an array of bitboards as part of a position object. A 1 bit inside a bitboard implies the existence of a piece of this type on a certain square. The 1 associated by the bit position. Of course, bitboards are not the only about the existence of pieces. It is a general purpose. Set-wise data structure fitting in one 64-bit register. For example, a bitboard can represent things like attack and defense sets, move target sets, and so on. Ah, that's gonna be... I'll just need more set-wise structs. So what it's saying is, like, we have one 64-bit array that has the position, and then we might have white knight, like, move, like, attacks. And that's another 64-bit array. And now we have all, you know, let's say it's 10, or tile 3, tile 10, tile 15, tile 40. And these are 50 or whatever. And these are all of the possible tiles that these knights could attack at. So when we run the math and we put them here, and that's how we can do it. But again, that's only in bits. Like, how would you calculate health? Right? Because, like, imagine you want to calculate, okay, I'm going to lose 3 health, but it's worth it because I'll kill the player, versus I'm going to lose 3 health, but I don't want to, like, die. So, like, I'd rather not get fucking hit right now. Fuck. Yeah. And also, I can't fit it inside 64. Unless I really just do an 8x8. But that's way too little of a board size. What is playing? Oh. A new thing started. Okay. Is that worship music? Why the fuck did it start playing worship music? Alright. Interesting. Let's put on... Let's do something... is there like a lo-fi somewhere? I just want something in the background. It's not too distracting. Okay. I need to figure out like a good list of playlists to put on. We'll do some crypt for now. Okay, let's get back to this. So fuck. Potential world states. And the issue is that with each tile increase that we consider, we exponentially increase the amount of memory we're using. Okay. What I'm imagining is most of these are not going to be how to put it. Most of these aren't going to need to be maps, right? Like, will the enemy die by performing this? It's just going to be a bit, a single true false. So I wonder if I do another bit map for at each world state for like evaluations about the enemy, right? So like imagine we have white knight attacks, and then we might have like attack and defense sets. Can I see an example of attack? How do I calculate attack sets? Yeah, so let's see this. Pawn patterns and properties. There are two approaches to determine pawn attack sets. Pawn move target squares or pawn structure properties, using a single pawn or set-wise with multiple pawns. So look up to 8 pawns per side, the set-wise approach has some merits. The disadvantage of set-wise is we likely need different code for white and black pawns. White pre-calculated lookups by color and square allow you to write more general code. A pawn captures diagonally forward but otherwise pushes forward 1, or optionally, 2 steps from its initial rank. For white versus black pawns, forward and backward are considered relative from either white's or black's point of view. Bitboards allow to determine pawn push target squares, or equivalently, their stop squares set-wise, while push pawns, their stop squares. A stop square of a pawn is a square where it can arrive in one non-capturing move, a pawn push. Telestops are the furthest square behind the stop on the pawn's front span, the final one on the promotion square. Telestops are the furthest squares behind the stop. Oh, so it's saying, like, if the pawn can take either diagonal or move forward 1, then the telestops are diagonal 1, up 1, up 1, up 1, and then diagonal 1, up 1. Like, the 3, like, if... Hold on, let me go back to paint. If this is a pawn, and it can go to these 3, it's saying that these up here past it are the stops? Is that what it's saying? I think that's what it's saying. In terminology of Hans Mock. Pawn structure is a term used to describe the position of all pawns on the board, ignoring all their pieces. Pawn structure encompasses a broad range of ideas, the general shape of pawns, to specific characteristics of individual pawns. Full evaluations of pawn structure might be quite expensive. To speed up the evaluation, many programs use a separate pawn hash table addressed by a special key derived from the pawn's position. Since pawn structure changes rather slowly, hit rate for such a table is typically above 95%. Anything strictly pawn related can be stored in this hash table, including pawn shield terms to be used dynamically for king safety. Oh god, there's so many ways to solve this. Okay, so it seems like there are a lot of different ways to process this data, but it is absolutely correct in that the way you represent, as always with anything coding based, the data is more important than how you modify it. If you store the data the wrong way, you'll always have a harder time modifying it. So, alright, hold on. Let me see if I can find a YouTube video real quick. This one looks like it could be promising. We'll watch the top, like, 2.
Having insurance isn't the same as having State Farm. It's like getting Bateman when you need Batman.
Stop! Whoa, cat lady! Time out!
Nice fanny bag.
About
Thank
2
you.
years ago, I set out to build
Oh, hold on. Let me turn off the music. And then we will... I'll make sure you can actually hear what the fuck he's saying. Turn this up.
The idea of writing a program that could beat me at something I do quite regularly. About 2 years ago, I set out to build my own chess computer. The idea of writing a program that could beat me at something I do quite regularly was very intriguing, and it turned out to be one of the best programming experiences of my life. I found so much elegancy, and the overall experience of building and iterating on it was very satisfying. The very first thing we have to do is to think about how we're going to represent a chess position, programmatically. Our initial instinct might be to encode the pieces in some way and store it in an array. But there's a much more efficient method we could use, the bitboard method. Bitboards capitalize on the fact that a chessboard has 64 squares, and a 64-bit integer also contains 64 bits of information. So we can represent the position of, say, all white pawns with one large number, where each bit corresponds to a specific square on the board. If we now want to check if some square is occupied by any of these pawns, we can simply take that square bitboard, perform a bitwise AND operation with the pawns, and check for a non-zero result. It's things like this which enables the generation of possible moves, and when you're searching millions of positions a second, a significant amount of time is spent here. What we did now amounts to a handful of CPU instructions, so it's really fast. Finally, the whole board could be represented by 12 of these bitboards, one for each piece, along with a few game rules.
Wait, so this is a piecewise
Before we can go
one,
and
right?
find the best move, we have to somehow... A 64-bit integer also contains 64 bits of information. So we can represent the position of, say, all white pawns with one large number, where each bit corresponds to a specific square on the board.
Yeah, okay, this is piecewise.
If we now want to check if some square is occupied by any of these pawns, we can simply take that square bitboard, perform a bitwise AND operation with the pawns, can simply take that. If we now want to check if some square is occupied by any of these.
If we want to check if some squares are occupied by these pawns... Oh, then we take the bitboard of the pawn and then compare it to the position.
Pawns, we can simply take that square bitboard, perform a bitwise AND operation with the pawns, and check for a non-zero result. It's things like this which enables the generation of possible moves, and when you're searching millions of positions a second, a significant amount of time is spent here. What we did now amounts to a handful of CPU instructions, so it's really fast. Finally, the whole board could be represented by 12 of these bit boards, one for each piece,
Yeah.
along with a few game rules. Before we can go and find the best move, we have to somehow be able to tell if a position is better than the other.
Yeah.
We need an evaluation function,
Yeah.
one that takes a chessboard as input and outputs who's doing better.
Yes.
Some positions are straightforward, like when someone has checkmated the other or when it's a draw. So let's start here. We're going to assign a large, arbitrary number when white has won, and the negative of it when black has won.
Okay.
A draw will be 0. When the game is yet to be decided, it's more tricky, but generally, capturing pieces indicates a strong position. So for starters, we assign values to each piece.
Yeah.
A pawn will be a1, and all the other pieces will be scored relative to it.
Yeah.
By adding up the white pieces and subtracting the black ones, we get a score. The more positive, the better for white, and the more negative, the better for black. But let's not stop here. We can give our evaluation function a little more nuance by considering where a piece is located. See, a knight in the middle is better than one on the edge, as it controls more squares. So for each square, we can adjust that piece's value by some amount. So now when we count the material, this knight will be worth 3.25, and this one 2.5. We can do this for all piece types. For instance, the king generally wants to be tucked away in the corner. These adjustment values makes a tremendous difference. It makes the engine make natural moves, placing pieces on active squares and prioritizing king safety.
Well, yeah, but that's gotta be relational to what's at an advantage, right? Because like if there's only like, let's say you like the optimal move is actually to run the king across the board. Are you just subtracting away? I guess because the other options aren't as good, then it's fine. But
even though this way of defining a position's value is hard-coded, it is very sufficient for creating extremely strong chess engines. And the reason for that is search. We start by extracting all the legal moves. We then make those moves and use the evaluation function to get a score. We do this for all the moves, and it seems like taking the pawn is the best move. However, if we calculate further, the black king will capture the rook, resulting in a draw. So taking the pawn is of course bad, and you should move your rook. Had we taken black's response into consideration for every move, moving the rook would have maximized the eval. And this is what it's all about, searching down the game tree. But now, let's do it properly with the famous minimax algorithm. As input, it will take in a board and a depth, indicating how deep we will search. And it will return the best achievable evaluation. To demonstrate, we will search to a depth of 2, meaning white makes a move and black responds. Or in other terms, we will consider white's moves and then black's responses to those moves. Nodes will be orange when it's black's turn to move. So let's call minimax on the starting position and initialize a variable with a low, arbitrary value. We will generate the moves, and then for each move, we will make that move, resulting in a new position.
yep.
We then call minimax on that board with depth -1. Now we're on a node where it's black's turn, and black is trying to minimize the evaluation. So while we initialize it low for white, let's do it high for black. And then we do the same procedure as with white, iterating over all the moves. As with all recursion, we eventually have to return something. So let's call our evaluation function and return the result. Also, the game could be over before we reach our desired depth, so let's check for this too. Since the return value is lower than what we have found so far, we will assign it as the new best. We do this for all the
Or move in board.move. Board.make the move. Evaluate the minimax of that board. If value is less than best, best is equal to value. Hold on, let me go back.
result. Also, the game could be over before we reach our desired depth, so let's check for this too. Since the return value is lower than what we have found so far, we will assign it as the new best. We do this for all the moves, and eventually when we're done, we're going to return that evaluation, taking us back to the starting position. Just like with black, let's save the result, compare it, and do this procedure for the remaining moves. If we take a closer look and rewind a little bit, just when white evaluated the first branch, then went down this path and found a -4, we know for sure that this node will be -4 or lower, since it's black choosing the moves. But since white has already found a -2, it will never go down this branch, and so there is no need to evaluate the remaining positions. We can prune the search tree. We would do this by implementing the alpha-beta algorithm, where you keep track of the best eval each side can force. I won't delve into the details here though, since there's already a great video on it by Sebastian Log.
Okay,
I'll
we're
put a
watching
link
that
in the
next.
description. There are many more optimizations you could make, but this was the very core of HS Engine. If you ever do decide to embark on this journey, there's a whole Wikipedia about all of this.
Okay.
I wish you a happy day.
Okay. General recap of what we've learned so
Is
far.
the client's project on budget? We're probably
God.
over, but by
I'm
how
so
much?
glad I have YouTube Red.
I'll take tomorrow to figure it out before he asks.
Say we want to write a program that can play some turn-based game like chess.
Okay.
One aspect of this is the
Oh, I
search.
already like it more because he's already contextualizing it to all turn-based.
To write a program that can play some turn-based game like chess.
Uh-huh.
One aspect of this is the search algorithm, which is what allows the program to look ahead at possible future positions before deciding what move it wants to make in the current position.
Uh-huh.
This white dot represents some position in our game with the white side to move.
Uh-huh.
To keep things simple, let's say that in every position there are only 2 possible moves to choose between. We can visualize these moves as 2 separate branches, at the end of which are 2 new positions, where it's now, of course, black's turn to move.
Right.
We can continue expanding the tree of moves until either we reach the end of the game, or we decide to stop because going deeper would take too much time. Either way, at the end of the tree we now need to perform a static evaluation on these final positions. A static evaluation just means trying to estimate how good the position is for one side without making any more moves. For example, a crude approach...
Oh, so you're only returning once you get to max depth. Which is how you avoid the possibility of overlooking a sacrifice into something useful, because you're filtering out, or you're not even considering it until you get to that max depth. Okay, that makes more sense.
Chess would be to add up the values of the remaining white pieces and subtract from that the values of all the remaining black pieces. So large values would favor white, while small values would favor black.
Sure.
For this reason, white is always trying to maximize the evaluation, while black is trying to minimize it.
Sure.
So let's start with these 2 positions on the bottom left. Say we evaluate them and they come out as -1 and +3. Well, in the previous position it was white's turn to move, and since white will of course choose the move that leads to the highest evaluation, we can assign this position a value of 3 as well. Next, let's evaluate these 2 positions, and say we get +5 and +1. Once again, from the previous position, white would pick the move leading to the highest evaluation, and so we can assign it a value of 5. We've now evaluated both the positions stemming from this position, where it's black's turn to move. Black will choose the move that leads to the lowest evaluation, and so we can assign this position a value of 3.
Right.
I'll very quickly step through the other half of the tree. Say we evaluate these as -6 and -4, white will pick the -4. The next 2 positions are evaluated as 0 and 9, so white will pick the 9, and between -4 and 9, black will pick -4.
Right.
At last we've arrived at the top of the tree, where we can see that white should...
Okay, so my question earlier was, what if the player does the dumb thing? But... so then how do you plan for this? But what we're saying is, you calculate for it anyways, and then you act as if they aren't going to be dumb. Okay, I understand now. Because I think it was throwing me off was I assumed that you did the return value up here if you didn't, like, if as part of the alpha beta pruning was that you checked it up here and returned out early. But you're still doing it down here. You're just checking to see if this value is worse than that value. So the second that you hit a 5 here, you should cancel out because the black would obviously choose to do the 3, I think. Or no. Wait, fuck. I have the numbers backwards.
Choose
I think,
the move
but
on the
it's
left,
fine.
since that way, even if black plays the best move, white will still get a +3 position.
Yeah.
So now that the basic idea is hopefully clear, let's look at how this is implemented in code. We have a function called minimax, which takes in the current position, a depth for how many moves ahead we want to search, and a bool called maximizing player.
Correct.
We begin by checking if depth is equal to 0 or if the game is over in the current position, in which case we return the static evaluation of that position. Otherwise, if it's currently the turn of the maximizing player, which in our example means it's white to move, then we want to find the highest evaluation that can be obtained from this position. So we create a variable called maxEvaluation and initialize that to -infinity. We then loop through.
If depth is equal to 0 or game over in the current position, return static evaluation of position. If the maximizing player max eval is equal to -infinity. I'm gonna go put my pizza in the oven real quick. I'll be right back.
All the children.
Alright, we have 17 minutes, and then I am gonna eat and probably just get off for a bit and just think about this a bunch, because I don't feel like I'm gonna be able to make any coherent decisions tonight, and I feel like I'm just gonna have to do a bunch of more reading and research, and I don't know if I want to sit here and fucking eat on mic while I'm doing that. Plus, I have to go to bed in probably like an hour anyways, so. Okay. My bad on the, I just realized that you guys weren't able to see it because of the paint, because I hadn't properly enabled it yet. So, shout out to, Sebastian, Leg, and, Bartek's Pizza for the videos.
Brainstorming is my
God, I have to
superpower,
read
not
these.
organization. So Canva Whiteboards gets all my ideas.
Skip.
Say we
And it restarted the fucking. Oh. Okay.
depth is equal to 0 or if the game is over in the move, then we want to find the highest evaluation that can be obtained from this position. So we create a variable called maxEvaluation and initialize that to -infinity. We then loop through all the children of the current position and by children I just mean the positions that can be reached in a single move. To find the evaluation of each child, we make a recursive call to the minimax function, passing in the child, depth -1, and false, since it will now be the other player's turn to move. We can then set max eval equal to whichever is greater between the current max evaluation and the evaluation of the child position. Once we've evaluated all the children, we can return the maximum evaluation that we've found. Now, we do essentially the same thing for the minimizing player, creating min eval set initially to positive infinity, and for each child position we call minimax, passing in the child, depth -1, and this time...
Okay. If depth equals 0, so if we're at the max depth, or game over in the position, return the static evaluation of position. So if the game fails early, then yeah, we want to return that. That makes sense. And then and then if we're the maximizing player, oh, that's the binary we're going to flip back and forth. Max eval is equal to negative infinity for each child of position. Eval is equal to min max. Child depth -1 false. Max eval. Okay. Yeah, I think I'm getting it.
True. Min eval then gets set to whichever is smaller between the current minimum evaluation and the child's evaluation, and finally we return the min evaluation. Let's step through this example again, this time with the code in front of us.
Oh, beautiful.
First though, we'll need an initial call to the minimax algorithm to start things off. Okay, we're at the first position and we want to find the max of the two children, so we call minimax on the first child. It wants to find the min of its two children, so it calls minimax on its first child, which in turn wants to find the max of its two children, so it calls minimax on the first. At this point though, depth is equal to 0, so minimax returns the static evaluation of that position. This value gets passed up to the parent, which then calls minimax on its second child, receives the static evaluation from that, and returns the max between the two children. That value gets passed up to its parent, which now calls minimax on its second child.
Yep.
Minimax is called on its two children as the min child.
Yep.
The algorithm. Now that we've seen how plain minimax works, let's run through this example yet again to look at how it can be sped up using pruning. These first few steps are the same as before, but consider the situation we have after evaluating this +5 position. Without yet evaluating the other position, we know that white can at least get a 5 from here, so we can mark this position as being greater than or equal to 5. We can now see that black won't go down this branch because he already has a better option available. This observation means that we don't have to waste any computation on evaluating this final position. We can simply pretend it doesn't exist. In other words, we've pruned it from the tree. Things now continue as normal again for a few steps until we get...
Okay, so you do prune it ahead of time, but I would just assume that, I guess, whenever the player goes to do something, that you then rerun the calculation again, and so if they did do the dumb thing, then now you have that dumb thing available to you. But the real issue is that you can't consider how to say it. I can't actually prune anything using this because in my example, it's player, player, enemy, enemy, or essentially it's black, black, white, white, which means that and I can't prune it, because if I prune it, then I have to redo the calculation, which I'm not supposed to do. So I don't think I actually can do the alpha beta pruning. Unless I change it to run it in the moment faster, which maybe that's better. But I would assume that it's going to be better to be able to play this over multiple seconds or multiple frames. Because you'll probably get at least like a half second normally, right? Because it's going to be, you start this, all the enemy animations go, or begin to start. Then the player hooks in, and all the player gets like a window to respond, and then the player animations start. Then the enemy animations and the player animations finish. Then the player starts their turn. We wait for however long they're going to take. Then they give their input. Then we start their animations. And that's when we grab this. So I feel like that gives us a good window that I don't think I have to worry about that pruning as much. But we'll see.
Yet here, black to play in this position will be choosing whichever of the two moves leads to the lowest evaluation, so we know the evaluation here is going to be less than or equal to -4. We can now be sure that white won't go down this branch because he already has a better option available to him, and so we can prune these positions.
I can prune on the enemy side, right? I guess if I go into multiple turn depth, I can. But I don't know if I can actually do that. If I can go... Because technically right now my depth is 4, which is player, player, enemy, enemy, or black, black, white, white. If I set that to 8, black, black, white, white, or no, 12, black, black, white, white, or no, it could be 8, black, black, white, white, black, black, white, white. Maybe then, maybe it would be faster. I'm not sure. One of the other things that I would be really curious to see is if we could cache evaluations, right? Because assuming that we work with perfect knowledge like we're supposed to, then theoretically, if like, I would imagine that there's an optimization here where white chooses to go to 3 and then black chooses to go to the 5. This is a bad example because we crimped it or cut it off. But let's imagine that there was that had been evaluated. Well, then now we can look at that and go, cool. Let's just shove that to our root node, and then we'll just cut out all the other data that we had, and that way we don't have to redo the core evaluation because we're actually at this world state now.
As you can see, the result of the search is exactly the same as before. We've just saved some time by not considering positions when they can't affect the outcome. Okay,
Okay. The issue, though, is that because black is going first, and I am not allowed... I can't rerun the algo in between black, black, white, white. Or I don't want to, I should say. Which means that I can't crimp on black, but I could crimp on white, because, or prune, or whatever word you want to use, because I think you can prune white. See, there's some small pruning I could do. Well, actually, that'll be a pretty substantial pruning, because it'll be per enemy. Will be the white side. So they're actually, you could still prune a good bit, but I can't prune black, which is unfortunate.
I want to quickly go through a slightly deeper tree. I'll just fly through these first few steps because there's no pruning happening, so it's quite straightforward. In fact, it is actually kind of interesting that we've gone through half the tree and haven't been able to prune a single position yet. So pruning isn't guaranteed to occur. It very much depends on what order the moves are in. Ideally, the moves would be ordered from best to worst for the player whose turn it is in that position. For example, if these two moves had been the other way around, we would have been able to prune the second one. For this reason, it's usually a good idea to order the moves based on how likely they are to be good. For example, in chess, capturing a piece with a pawn is very likely to be a good move, and so it would be wise to explore it first. Anyway, let's continue.
So you might explore attacks first. That makes sense.
With this tree. So this next position has been evaluated as +1, and now I have a question. Do we need to evaluate the other position here, or can we prune it?
Can I prune this? I think the answer is no, because we're now in an entirely distinct branch, and so that would, even though the value might be worse than what we already have prepped. Oh, hold on. You prune that. Well, no, because if it's better than 3... Fuck, hold on. My brain is not braining, I don't know.
If you're in the mood, I'd recommend pausing the video to figure this one out. So, without evaluating the other position, we can say for sure that the previous position is less than or equal to 1.
Right.
Since black is of course just going to choose whichever is lowest.
Right.
This means that white will never go down this particular branch, because if the best he can hope for is a +1, he'd rather just go the other way at the start, where he's guaranteed a +3.
Okay.
So we can indeed prune that position. Alright, let's finish off this tree. Here we got a 5 and a 2, so black would of course choose the 2. That means this position is less than or equal to 2, and so like before, white will never go down this branch since he can get a 3 by going the other way. This means that we can prune the rest of these positions.
Yeah, so I think if I was to try to... Hold on. Let me go back to Paint. Control-Alt-Delete. Let's set gray as our... Okay, and then let's go back into... I left the AFK screen on. God, I'm so fucking dumb. Okay. It is what it is. Okay. It is what it is. My pizza's almost done. Okay, or I'm gonna do this quick thought experiment, and then I'm gonna get my pizza, and then I'm probably gonna call it. Okay, we got 2 minutes. Let's run through this in 2 minutes, and then I'm ending stream. Okay. In our analogy, we have black is going to go into all of its actions into another round of black. So based on this logic, and then that's going to go into another round of white, into another round of white, because we don't actually have guaranteed back and forth turns. So because of this, what we end up with is we end up in a situation where if this is, let's say this is a -5, or no, we can't evaluate till we get to the end here. So we have to go all the way down to here, and then we say, okay, well this is 4, and that's 2, so we return 4, and then 4 is then going to head up to here, and then let's say that this is 3, and that's 1, so we return 3. Okay, so its value is 3 here. There should be another layer of black here, actually. But the second that this hits 3, I still have to evaluate the 1 because the 1 could be better. So I can't prune this. And then once this hits 1, I go, okay, cool, that is 3. The only way I could prune this... Well, no, that's not even true. Because I was going to say, maybe if it's higher. If that's 5, then I would leave early. But this could be 6. And if that's 6, it's because they're going back and forth is what allows them to prune. But I think I might be able to prune... Well, no, I can't. Because let's say that this is an evaluation of 8, right? So 8 is objectively worse for the player, as they would prefer to have 6. Oh, fuck, my alarm's went off. Pizza's done. Okay. I'm gonna go grab that, but I think my takeaway from this is that I need to think long and hard about how I structure this. And then I'm probably gonna run through a really shitty version and then see where we end up there. And I will be streaming, if not tomorrow, then the day after. So expect that. Thank you so much for hanging out. And I'm gonna have a better setup so that I don't keep fucking leaving paint open.